ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्यङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवर योगासनाध्यासितम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In this Friday Atma Vichara session, we have been meditating on Bhagavan's answers on self-enquiry, which has been beautifully compiled in a book called Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950. This book is a wonderful compilation of all the questions put by many devotees to Bhagavan on the subject matter of Atma Vichara and Bhagavan's answers between 1900 to 1950. And this has been wonderfully compiled for us by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji. We have been looking at the question and answer sessions between 1936 to 1950. After contemplating on this week's question and answer, Bhagavan's answer to that, meditating upon it by His abundant grace, then we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Following that, Nandakumarji would be contemplating further on Atma Vichara. And finally, we will be having the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. So, we have been looking at the questions from 1936 to 1950, and we have reached the 97th question. And the devotee is asking, I am learned in scriptures. The method of self-enquiry is too difficult for me. I am a woman with 7 children and household cares. It leaves no time for meditation. I request Bhagavan to give some easier method. The question is, I am learned in scriptures. The method of self-enquiry is too difficult for me. I am a woman with 7 children and household cares. It leaves no time for meditation. I request Bhagavan to give some easier method. Bhagavan's answer is, no learning or knowledge of scriptures is necessary to know the self, as no man requires a mirror to see himself. All knowledge is required only to be given up eventually as non-self. Nor is household work or cares with children necessarily an obstacle. If you can do nothing more, at least continue saying I to yourself mentally all the time. As advised in Who Am I, whatever work you may be doing, and whether you are sitting, standing, or walking, I is the name of God. It is the first and the greatest of all mantras. Repeat Bhagavan's answer. No learning or knowledge of scriptures is necessary to know the self, as no man requires a mirror to see himself. All knowledge is required only to be given up eventually as non-self, nor is household work or cares with children necessarily an obstacle. If we can do nothing more, at least continue saying I to yourself mentally all the time. As advised in Who Am I, whatever work you may be doing and whether you are sitting, standing, or walking, I is the name of God. It is the first and the greatest of all mantras. The questioner here has studied many scriptures and yet identifying oneself with the body and its role as mother of many children and family, and then further inquiring what is the easiest way amidst all of this, because self-enquiry seems to be very difficult for one to get the self-knowledge. And Bhagavan's answer first very beautifully clarifies anything known and anything done outside of oneself is no way a means for one to get back to the self. He puts it in a very beautiful way. No learning or knowledge of scripture is necessary to know the self. In fact, that could become an obstacle, but it's not that it is being downplayed. Definitely knowledge of the scriptures, definitely the knowledge of reading Upanishads or any other thing will bring a lot more clarity. At least this basic fundamental clarity that the error I am considering myself to this body seems to be not correct. That much clarity would definitely come about, and it will also bring about many sadhanas which will aid in making the mind one-pointed. There is no doubts about those things. But what Bhagavan's self-enquiry emphasizes is the natural presence of the self as the fundamental Shruti note in all music. And the music may be a big bang or a silent melody. The fundamental thing which is there is the self. And Bhagavan says that since self is very natural and there is no need for any other instrument. It is said to see a light, we don't need another light because the light is self-effulgent. So Bhagavan is saying here, there is absolutely no need for any of those aids because it is only the self which reveals everything else. It is the self which is the pure presence. It is the self which is the pure consciousness. It is the self which is the undivided truth. And therefore, if we were to look at it, what is one substance from which everything is made of? We can say it is the self. Without the self, there is no anya substance can be recognized, anya substance is even that idea can rise. So the self is a substratum, is the fundamental thing. It is with which everything is made of. If at all we look with a division of everything, it is self and self throughout. So having known the self, having recognized it as naturally it exists at all times, in all our experiences, and therefore recognizing it is very important. So Bhagavan says that it requires no mirror there, because the anything, if we say there is a thought existing, then who is giving that existence to that thought? If you say the thought is absent, and if that is again a thought, who is giving existence to that thought? And if there is a thought-free state, who is aware of that thought-free state? So by inquiring, we recognize the innate nature, the natural nature of ourself, the self. And it is something that we cannot escape. It is only, if at all it has to be said, the attention to it is not being given. It is rather taken for granted. And therefore, taking it for granted and then looking for it in the scriptures or in doing something is like Bhagavan says, holding a light and looking for darkness. So we should recognize this fundamental teaching of Bhagavan. That is what Atma Vichara does. So what Atma Vichara makes it practical is by repeatedly inquiring, who am I? He makes us recognize what we are, that we are the self here and now, and that says the self alone is, and it is the self whose existence is all the existence, whose consciousness is the only thing which is aware of everything, which makes us know. And it is in it, there is absolutely no division. And by making us recognize that natural truth which is there, effortlessly present, given to all of us here and now, because that is what we are, Bhagavan is emphasizing here when the person says the self-enquiry is very difficult. He is saying that the difficulty perhaps is only coming because we are not seeing what it is so naturally present and taken the adhyaropa, the forcing of all other experiences upon it. So Bhagavan is saying here that none of our household efforts or work, any external duty, is nowhere can come, because this is the fundamental truth. So we need not be worried about the role play that has been given to us by the Ishvara. This body and this mind can continue to function, if at all it has to function. Our only job and responsibility is to identify ourselves with our true nature here and now, which is there, and not take it for granted and take something else to be ourselves, which is the I am this body idea. And then by taking that to be real, suffer due to it. So Bhagavan is saying here that the scriptures is not necessary to know the self. Our household duties is not an obstacle to it, because it is the fundamental truth, the innate nature of ourself, the natural state of ourself. And if at all, if there is any sadhana that is required, because it rises first as I without any attachment. It is pure I, which Bhagavan calls it as the I, or the Spurana. It is just there as shining purely as the presence, as the awareness, as the undivided substratum. And because that is the first word or name that has arisen from the self itself, Bhagavan calls it is the first and the greatest of all mantras. All other mantras come afterwards. This is the natural mantra, which is going on undivided. I, it is going on undivided. And Bhagavan asks us, if at all there is any sadhana required, we should turn our attention to that. And that is exactly what in the enquiry Bhagavan makes us do by inquiring, who am I? Turn our attention to that I. What do we call as I within ourselves? And that getting back our attention to that which we have taken for granted repeatedly in a way of conscious effort, in a way of consciousness plus the effort, in the way of knowing and doing. The only thing we need to know and do, rather, is to understand ourselves. Therefore, the who am I, or the mantra japa of I, as Bhagavan says here, brings the attention back to oneself. And that repeated attention to oneself and recognizing one's own nature as it is naturally, one gets to understand that none of the external doing of the body and the mind has absolutely any impression on the self, the pure being, the pure consciousness that one is. And therefore it is natural. That is how it is. Effortlessly, that's what it is. And that is what all that Bhagavan is asking us to do, or all the Upanishads is asking us to do, is not recognize ourselves as the householder, or as the body, as the knower or the doer, but as that pure I, which is untouched by any of the knowing, any of the doing, which is naturally there. And that is all that one needs to do if one attention runs away into division. But if one, by repeated practice, can remain in that natural state of the I that is going on, then the body and the mind can be engaged in whatever which way it has to be engaged. But as one is very clear, one is the undivided Satchidananda Swarupa, here and now. And there is no entity to even raise and claim, but that is how one is. Until such time, Bhagavan says, the sadhana of turning to the I, the Mula Mantra, or the substratum, is very, very essential. And for that, Bhagavan has given us the Atma Vichara. Whenever any objective distractions happen in the form of thoughts first, and when the attention is moving out away from the natural I, Bhagavan asks us to diligently inquire, to whom is this? Who am I? And bring the attention back to the natural innate state of ourself. And by repeated practice, Bhagavan assures that the mind will gain enough strength to remain at that substratum and then eventually being absorbed in that substratum, and the substratum alone rises and shines through, says Bhagavan. Until such time, he advises us to repeatedly practice. If at all there is only any knowing or doing, this is the only knowing and doing, getting back to what we are with repeated practice. With His abundant grace, for the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichara. Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Nandakumarji.
Namo Ramana. Dileep ji has read out from the question answers contained in the work. Bhagavan Ramana replies. And the questioner there is a family householder. If I recollect correctly, it is Mrs. Khanna. How the I is said to be the original Nama. Elsewhere in the talks, Bhagavan quotes from Taittiriya Upanishad to say how the Aham Nama is the first name of God. Let us meditate on the first verse of Ulladu Narpadu to get a feel of what Bhagavan is saying here. That the I can be held directly in Vichara or even as a mantra. Even when we are acting, doing this or doing that, the I has never gone anywhere. It is always there. It can be held as a japa, dhyana, as well as in vicharam. In Ulladu Narpadu, immediately after the Mangala Shlokas are completed, the work begins with the first 4 verses covering the entire gamut of Bhagavan's teachings. The first verse is on the self, the second verse is on Ishvara, the third verse is on world, and the fourth verse is on the Jiva. Let us just spend some time with the first verse. Namulaham Kandalal Nanavam Shakti Ula Or Mudalai Oppal Orutalaye Namavuru Sittiramum Parpanum Serpadamum Ar Oliyum Attanayum Tana Avan. Everything is the I, says Bhagavan. What all and how does everything come into being? Nam Ulaham Kandalal. Because we have this experience. Each one of us has this experience that we are seeing the world. The seeing, Revatima in our talk, which is posted into one of our groups, or talk given to the meditation and study circle, she has given a talk on Dhyana Shloka. It's a wonderful talk which all of us should see, in which she says the eyesight is taken, there too is Kannai Moodi Amardukol. Kanna Muchi Kulituko, Devaranne Nenaduku. Why Sadhuvam Swamigal has taken the seeing and why Bhagavan has taken the seeing in this first verse? Revatima says that in one of the explanations, she says that even the other senses, like hearing, she says you may see a loudspeaker looking very nice, and then you may decide to switch it on and see what is the nature of the sound. Or you may see a cracker being lit up, and immediately you may close your ears, she says. You may see the bread shop, then you may walk near and feel the fragrance coming in. Similar with the touch and taste also, that the eyesight is used to facilitate the other senses also. And Venkateshji would say 70% of sensory inputs comes through the eyes. So Namulaham Kandala. Since we sense the world, since we see the world, Nanavam Shakti Ula Or Mudalai Uppal Urudalaye. It is indeed agreeable to accept one power which somehow manifests as this multiplicity of the world. Uladinil Aladila Adishaya Shakti, says Bhagavan in Ashtakam, that the Maya Shakti is an Adishaya Shakti. That Shakti itself is beyond the reaches of the mind. And because of that Adishaya Shakti, the same power appears to us as the world, as the multiplicity of this world. Na Ulaham Kandalal. Nanavam Shakti Ula Or Mudalai Uppal Urudalaya. It is indeed agreeable that there must be one power behind the seer and the seen. Nama Uru Sittiramum. The whole seen world is called as a picture of name and forms. See, it is wonderful that science is also coming around slowly to Vedanta. There is a YouTube presentation as to the reality or the unreality of the senses, where scientists themselves have discovered that the senses are all only within a particular range. The seeing is a perception beyond which there are some colors, or beyond which there is a radiation, and below which there is a radiation. There is an upper and lower limit within which the seeing is there. Below that level of bandwidth you cannot see. Above the level of bandwidth also you cannot see. And Newton, of course, he splits the same white color into the 7 colors. And using the same prism, he rejoins all the 7 colors into the white color. That is, when you see somebody wearing white, then all the colors are included in that. We feel white means nothing, but the merger of all colors also comes back into white. And Namulaham Kandalal. Since we see the world, they have found that the senses are only a particular way of seeing the reality. There is a reality. But since the perception is limited in the sensory area, you see the same reality as a sensory world. Namulaham Kandalal. Nana, so it is the one reality, but since we use the instruments of perception, we see it as the world. Say the scientists, that's how they discover that the snake lives in a different world, the bat lives in a different world, because its senses are different. And Nanavam Shakti Ula Or Mudalai Uppal Urudalaye Nama Uru Sittiramam. This name and form, which completely is so multiple and appears before us as this world, Nama Uru Sittiramam Parpan, the one who is seeing it. The Drishtantam is of a movie. The Drishtantam, the example is that of a movie. But Lakshman Sharmaji says, and to our experience it is so clear, that there is a difference between the movie experience and the experience of the world and seer of the world. What is the difference? The difference is that in the movie, the seer is apart from the movie. He is sitting as a person who is apart from the picture. Whereas in the world experience, the seer is included within the picture itself. Therefore, if the world of name and form is only a way of perceiving and is actually dropped as unreal, then the seer also vanishes along with it as unreal. Namavuru Sittiramum Parpanam Serpadamum. There is a screen which is the Adhara for both the Namavuru Sittiram and the Parpan and the seer. For both, there is a screen. The screen is called as Sat Chit, existence, consciousness. As Sat, it is the existence. As Chit, it is Aruli. It is the light that reveals the pictures. There is once again a difference between the picture experience and the actual Sat Chit. In the picture experience, the Sat is separate, the Chit is separate. The Adhara for the pictures, the Vastram, the screen is separate. And as Venkateshji would repeatedly point out to us, that the screen doesn't alter at all. The pictures may change, but the screen doesn't change at all. That screen and the light that reveals the pictures in actuality is only one substance called as Sat Chit. It is Irundu Olir. It is self-luminous. Therefore, the Sittiramum, the multiplicity of names and forms, Parpanam, the one who is seeing that, Serpadamum, the existence, that is the Adhara for the names and forms and the seer, Arolium, and the Chit that reveals the picture show, Attanayum Tanam Avan. Everything is the I. All these are nothing but the I, says Bhagavan. What does it exactly mean? When we are covering the Atma Bodha, we find ourselves in a segment where the Jnani merges with the Brahman. How does he merge with the Brahman? He understands that all these Namavuru is nothing but the I. All these names and forms is nothing but the I. How he makes it out like that? That because the I is ever present and unchanging, all the changing names and forms must only be this ever present I. How can we experience that? Even now, before I commenced addressing, the self-attention is present. Even when I am speaking, the self-attention is present. Even after the speaking is completed, addressing an audience is completed, the I is present. So what is the Namavuru Sittiram, the apparent presence of the whole world, in which these 11 or 12 satsangis are sitting for Atma Vicharam, and I am the seer of that. Now, all these are changing and I am continuously changing because I am speaking. The body is moving. But then, in this moving world of names and forms, which includes the speaker also, which includes the seer also, the self, the I, as Bhagavan says to Mrs. Khanna, the I is unchanging. So what else can all these names and forms be? The names and forms are nothing but the I. Who was searching for the next property, who was searching for the next set of knowledge, who was searching for the next set of experiences now understands that when there is stillness, when there is oneness with the first name of God, the I, then one is everything. That I is already everything. We have Sayujya with that. We have Sayujya Padavi. Oneness, the one who was feeling, he is a seer of multiplicity of the world. When he merges or she merges, the he and she also being illusory. When there is a merger of the limited with the I, as Bhagavan says to Mrs. Karna, this I cannot be obstructed by your duties. Your duties cannot come in the way of the ever-present I, whatever may be the prarabdha. Your prarabdha may say that you are a householder, a lady who is having 7 children to take care of. One can imagine the amount of work that has to go on. But has the I gone anywhere? The I is always present there. That is why Bhagavan says, you can hold the I as a nama, as a dhyana. It will take you there. In the Who Am I book, Bhagavan says, when explaining what is the mind, Bhagavan says, that which arises in you, in the body as the I, that is the mind. Even if you meditate on I, the mind will be taken to its source. What is that source? Attanayum Tana Avan. The Namavuru Sittiram, the names and forms, which is multiple. The Parpan, the individual, the Tirai, the screen, that is the Adhara for existence, which is the Satvastu. The Sat is the Adhara for the seer and the seen, and the Chit, the light which reveals, are all only the self. Attanayum Tanam Avan. So when we do self-enquiry, when we do Who Am I, suppose we begin Who Am I having got a problem or a trouble in this world. Any spiritual enterprise, when there is a crisis, Bhagavan says, when this dream world is throwing up very nice dreams, you will never feel like waking up. Whereas when it throws up a nightmare or two, we see the picture of another great being of a contemporary of Bhagavan. How it starts? A child has cancer, leukemia, and both the parents are at wit's end. We don't know what to do. That is the time when the knowledge comes to an end, when the doctors don't have anything to offer. That is when the normal man who has been dreaming a very pleasant dream now realizes that that dream is illusory. Its pleasures are illusory. If the child that is so young can be taken away, then all the pleasures you have enjoyed till then, of what value is that? The Buddha's teaching becomes very clear. Birth is sorrow, growth is sorrow, illness is sorrow, death is sorrow. Because the birth and growth are illusory. They are transitory. What is real? The reality is only the I. So any problem you may begin with, the solution and the problem are both nothing but the I. The problem is also transformed into the self. The possible solution at a future date is also the self. The present turmoil, the present time is also the self. All of the past is also the self. All of the future is also the self. The self alone is Attanayam Tanam Avan. To receive this teaching of Bhagavan, that all your troubles are at an end. When you abide in the self, is the best thing that can happen to the illusory being, apparently trapped in an illusory world. It makes us wake up and be one with Bhagavan, be one with the first name of God, be one with the self. That's why Bhagavan says, knowing or seeing the self is being the self. There is nothing more to do. That's what the practice of Atmavicharam blesses us with. And Dileep ji has assured us by reading the answer of Bhagavan that the same state can be reached even by holding I as japa. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana, sir. Apa Chit Sukhavarirashi Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Rudi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Rudi Chintayami.